It was just another Tuesday morning in downtown Atlanta. The sun gleamed off the glass towers, and the streets buzzed with the usual rush of ambition. Elijah Carter stepped out of his matte black Range Rover, tailored suit crisp, cufflinks gleaming. To anyone passing by, he looked like royalty, composed, confident, and calm. But this morning wasn't about power meetings or stock portfolios. It was personal. He walked up the steps of Windsor Federal Bank, a place he knew all too well. Not because he banked there, but because he owned it. That's right. Elijah Carter wasn't just a client. He was the CEO, the face behind its recent rise in national rankings. But he didn't wear his title like a badge. No camera crews, no entourage. Just a man handling his business. As he entered the lobby, no one batted an eye. Not the receptionist, not the tellers, and certainly not the floor manager standing near the VIP lounge. Elijah waited patiently in line, nodding politely to a couple in front of him. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward with a smile. But that's when it started. "Sir, this section is for priority clients only," the manager said, barely glancing up. Her tone was sharp. Dismissive, like she'd already decided he didn't belong. "I understand," Elijah said calmly. "I'm here on business." She crossed her arms. "Business or not, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside until someone who can assist you is free." The room went quiet. For a second, Elijah said nothing. But what happened next would leave the entire branch stunned, and change the manager's career forever. Elijah didn't move. He stood there, facing the manager, his eyes locked on hers, not in anger, but in disbelief. The tension in the room thickened. Conversations halted. Even the sound of the copy machine in the corner seemed to stop mid-click. The manager, whose name tag read, Karen L., shifted uncomfortably. She was used to getting her way, especially with anyone she didn't recognize in a tailored suit that didn't fit her mental picture of a CEO. "I'm not sure what you're not understanding," she said louder now, clearly trying to reassert control. "I asked you to step aside." Elijah's voice was still calm. "And I heard you. But I think you're making a mistake." She rolled her eyes. "Oh really? And what mistake would that be?" He paused, almost giving her a moment to reflect, but she didn't. Elijah glanced at a framed portrait on the wall, his portrait. Right above the board of directors listing. Right next to the corporate mission statement. He turned back to her. "I'm Elijah Carter, CEO of Windsor Federal Bank." The silence that followed felt deafening. Karen blinked. "Excuse me," I said. Elijah repeated slowly, "I run this bank. I'm not a client. I'm the man who signs your paychecks." The tellers exchanged glances. One of them gasped. A young assistant manager in the back dropped his pen. Karen's expression went pale, but she tried to recover. "That's impossible. I've never seen you before." Elijah stepped forward. "That's because I don't walk around introducing myself. I let my work speak. Unfortunately, today, your attitude is speaking louder." And just like that, the branch turned into a stage. Everyone was watching, and no one knew what he would say next. Karen's lips parted, but no words came out. Her confidence, so strong just moments before, was cracking in real time. I didn't mean any disrespect," she stammered. "It's just, we have protocols. Security measures. You understand, right?" Elijah's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do your protocols include profiling? Because you didn't ask the last two people for ID, you smiled at them. You escorted them personally." Karen's face flushed red. "That's not true." One of the tellers, a young woman named Jasmine, stepped forward. "Actually, it is." The whole lobby went still. Jasmine hesitated, then added, "You told the last two white clients, both wearing casual clothes, to head straight to the VIP lounge. You didn't even check if they had an appointment." Karen turned to Jasmine, her voice sharp. "This isn't your concern," but Elijah raised a hand. "Actually, it is her concern. It's everyone's concern. When a manager treats people differently based on assumptions, it reflects on the entire institution. Behind him, a few clients had begun filming. Smartphones discreetly held at chest level. The atmosphere had shifted, from silent curiosity to quiet outrage. Karen looked around, realizing she was no longer in control. "Mr. Carter, I truly apologize. It was an honest mistake." Elijah stepped closer, his tone still calm, but now laced with authority. "No, Ms. Karen, this was not a mistake. A mistake is entering the wrong number on a form. What you did was a choice." A hush fell again, and that's when Elijah reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. One tap, one call, and just like that, Karen's fate was no longer in her hands. Elijah's thumb hovered over the screen for just a second before he tapped the name, Mr. Langston, HR exec. The phone rang once, twice. Then, "Elijah, everything all right?" The voice on the other end was warm, respectful, clearly someone who knew exactly who was calling. Elijah didn't take his eyes off Karen as he spoke. "Not exactly. I'm at the Peachtree branch right now." A beat of silence. "The downtown one. What's wrong?" "I was just denied service. Dismissed. Publicly. By a manager who didn't bother to check credentials before making assumptions. We've got a room full of witnesses." Some recording. Dead silence on the line for 2 seconds. "Say no more," Mr. Langston replied. "Is the manager still there?" Elijah nodded. "Standing right in front of me." "I'll be there in 10. Elijah ended the call without another word. Karen stared at him, panic now fully replacing her previous smugness. Her voice came out in a whisper. You called corporate." "No," Elijah said. "I am corporate. I called human resources." "For your benefit." She started to speak again, but nothing coherent came out. The room around them felt tighter now. Staff stood frozen. Clients watched with uneasy eyes. The tension had gone beyond drama. It was real now. Consequences were no longer a possibility. They were on their way. Elijah turned and walked toward the VIP lounge and sat down calmly, like he owned the place, because he did. Karen didn't move. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the counter. And outside, a sleek black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Right on time. The storm had arrived. The glass doors parted with a quiet whoosh as Mr. Langston entered the branch. Tall, well-dressed, and walking with purpose, he looked like someone who didn't have time to waste. He scanned the lobby, locking eyes with Elijah, who gave a subtle nod from the VIP lounge. Karen stiffened the moment she saw him. Her voice caught in her throat. "Mr. Langston, He held up a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Don't speak. Not yet." The entire room seemed to step back, like watching the first thunderclap of a coming storm. The air was thick with anticipation. Phones were lowered, but still recording quietly behind purses and coffee cups. Langston turned to Elijah. "Would you like to speak privately?" Elijah shook his head. "No, I think transparency is necessary." The HR executive gave a slight, respectful bow. "Understood." Then he faced Karen directly. "You denied service to the CEO of this institution. You profiled him in front of staff, clients, and security cameras. Can you explain that?" Karen looked like she might melt into the floor. "I didn't recognize him. He didn't say who he was. I just thought." Langston raised an eyebrow. "Thought what?" She swallowed. "That he didn't belong in the VIP area." "And why's that?" Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just the sound of her own silence, echoing louder than any explanation she could have mustered. "That's what I thought," Langston said coldly. He turned to the assistant manager and motioned. "Please escort Ms. Karen to my car. Effective immediately. She's relieved of her duties. Permanently." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Karen stood frozen. Elijah leaned forward and said quietly, "Next time, don't judge by the suit. Or the skin." Karen walked out, and the whole branch watched history being corrected, one hard truth at a time. The doors closed behind Karen with a soft click, but the impact it left was anything but quiet. For several seconds, no one moved. The staff stared at the spot where she had stood just moments ago, stunned, shaken, and silently processing what had just happened. The silence was broken by Elijah, who stood slowly and buttoned his jacket. "Let's not pretend that what happened today was just about one person," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It was about culture. Jasmine, the young teller who had bravely spoken up earlier, looked down, unsure if she'd overstepped earlier. Elijah turned to her with a nod of appreciation. "You did the right thing. Thank you for standing up for integrity." She blinked, surprised. I couldn't stay quiet, and that's what leadership looks like," he replied. Mr. Langston cleared his throat. "There will be an internal review of this branch. Starting today, if any of you have experienced or witnessed similar behavior, now is the time to speak up and know this, corporate is listening." Heads slowly began to nod. Staff who had always kept their heads down were now making eye contact with one another, as if realizing they weren't alone anymore. A few clients clapped quietly, others offered smiles of solidarity. Elijah looked around the lobby, his tone softer now. "This bank is supposed to represent opportunity, equality, and trust. If we fail at that, we fail our community." He walked to the center of the lobby. "And I didn't build this place to let it rot from the inside." The energy shifted. The branch didn't just feel like a workplace anymore, it felt like it had just woken up. Outside the branch, a small crowd had begun to gather. The whispers from inside had made their way out, thanks to the quiet recordings that had gone viral within the hour. A local journalist, tipped off by someone in the building, stood near the entrance with a mic and camera crew. When Elijah stepped out, he didn't look surprised. A reporter approached him immediately. "Mr. Carter, can you confirm the incident that occurred inside your bank today?" Elijah paused for a second, glanced at Mr. Langston, and then nodded. "Yes, I can, and I will." The cameras rolled. "Today," Elijah began, "I walked into a branch of the very institution I built, one that's meant to serve everyone equally. I didn't walk in as a CEO, or even as a businessman. I walked in as a black man in America." The reporter looked up, visibly caught off guard by the statement's raw truth. "I was judged based on appearance. Dismissed, disrespected, and it could have ended quietly, brushed aside, like so many others. But not today." He looked directly into the lens. "Because too often, silence is safety for those in power and a prison for those unheard. This isn't about revenge, it's about reflection, accountability, culture." Reporters scribbled furiously, the crew adjusting mics and camera angles to catch every word. "I will not tolerate discrimination, at any level of my company. And I won't let it poison our branches, our employees, or our clients." He took a breath, steady and clear. "This is a wake-up call. And if you're uncomfortable, good. Change never comes without it." The crowd outside clapped, some hesitant, others wholehearted. Elijah stepped back. The statement was made, the silence had been broken. And now, the world was watching. Back at corporate headquarters, the aftermath was immediate. Emails pinged, phones rang, meetings were moved up. What had started as a quiet Tuesday had erupted into a full-blown reputational crisis, and a culture reckoning. Inside the boardroom, 12 executives sat in silence as Elijah entered. His presence was no longer just respected, it was impossible to ignore. "Before we begin," he said, placing his phone face down on the polished table, "I want to make one thing clear. What happened today is not an isolated event. It is the symptom of a deeper infection, one we've ignored for far too long." The CFO cleared his throat. "Elijah, no one is downplaying what happened. It was unacceptable, but going public the way you did was necessary," Elijah cut in. "I didn't do it to embarrass this company. I did it to save it." There were murmurs around the table, some nods, a few shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "You want to talk numbers?" Elijah continued. "Try calculating the cost of public trust lost. Try measuring the worth of every client who walks into our branches wondering if they'll be treated like they matter." He let the words sink in. Mr. Langston, seated 2 chairs down, added, "We've had complaints before. Quiet ones, subtle ones. Today's just the first time someone with power was on the receiving end." The room fell quiet. One of the senior VPs finally spoke. "What do you propose?" Elijah stood tall. "Mandatory bias training, a new reporting system for employee concerns, transparent reviews for all client-facing staff, and I want every branch manager in the city in this room by Friday." No one objected, because for the first time in a long time, change didn't feel optional. It felt overdue. By the end of the week, Elijah's message had echoed through every floor of the company. Branches were abuzz with nervous energy. Some employees feared what was coming, while others, quietly and courageously, felt empowered for the first time. At the Peachtree branch, the change was already visible. Jasmine, the teller who had spoken up, found herself called into the back office, not for discipline, but for something far more unexpected. Elijah stood inside with Mr. Langston. "Have a seat, Jasmine," he said with a warm smile. She sat slowly, unsure of what to expect. "I wanted to thank you in person," Elijah began. "Your courage helped shine a light in a dark moment." Jasmine shook her head. "I didn't do much. I just told the truth." "That's more than most ever do," Mr. Langston added. Elijah leaned forward. "We need leaders like you. People who don't stay silent. Who look out for others, not just themselves." He slid a file across the desk. "This is a promotion offer. Assistant manager. Starting next month. If you're willing to take it." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Me? Yes, you," Elijah said. "We need people with heart at the helm." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back and nodded. "I won't let you down." Back in the lobby, other employees took notice. The atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't just about fear of punishment anymore, it was about hope. Growth, accountability. Clients who had witnessed the incident returned days later, not to complain, but to thank the staff. Some even moved their accounts to Windsor, saying it was the first time they'd seen a bank actually walk its talk. Inside the system, voices were rising. Not just to report problems, but to become part of the solution. 3 weeks later, the Peachtree branch didn't just feel different, it was different. New posters hung on the walls, not with corporate slogans, but with real commitments. "Respect is not optional, we see you. We hear you, we serve you." Customers noticed, so did staff, and the numbers showed it. Client retention was up, positive reviews flooded in. Something had shifted. Elijah returned quietly one morning, not to test, not to supervise, but just to walk the floors and listen. He stopped by Jasmine's new desk. She wore her assistant manager badge like armor, but her nervous smile showed she was still adjusting. "You settling in?" Elijah asked. She nodded. "A lot to learn, but it feels right." He smiled. "That's how you know you're growing." As they spoke, an older client walked in, a black man in his 70s, dressed in overalls and a worn cap. He hesitated at the entrance. Jasmine noticed immediately and walked over with a gentle smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome in. How can I help you today?" The man smiled back, grateful. Elijah watched the moment unfold from a distance. No cameras, no speeches, just dignity, quietly restored. Later, at a leadership conference, Elijah was invited to speak. He didn't talk about profits or market shares. He talked about that day at the branch. About how leadership isn't defined by titles, but by action in moments that count. He ended with this: "True power isn't in owning a building. It's in changing what happens inside it." The crowd rose to its feet. And as Elijah stepped down from the podium, he wasn't just a CEO. He was a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful statement a leader can make is simply refusing to stay silent.